My life with Lamberto, Bava, and Dario Argento's Demons began in 1986. I was hanging out on my parents' radio station. A little else to do, I was thumbing through their large collection of newsprint and magazine subscriptions. You see, back in the day before the overuse of internet, DJs had to rely on news topics, stories, and/or gossip, fill in the gaps between the spinning of wax. It was in one of these such magazines that I found a full-page color advert for Dario Argento and Lamberto Bava's Demons. The ad blew me away and made my day. I was no stranger to seeing horror films promoted in magazines or in newspapers, but this was the first time I'd ever seen one in full color and full page. I had already clipped out newsprint of Return of the Living Dead's theatrical release, Creepers, and Fright Night, clipping them out and pressing them into pages of a book. But unfortunately, that book has long since disappeared. But it is all about the memories anyway, isn't it? So I had made up my mind that day in 1986 that even though I'd never rented a VHS or a beta or anything, one day I would. One day I would get to see Demons. Unfortunately for me, that day did not come until 1990. And rent the damn thing. And I did. I took it home that Saturday morning, and by late Sunday night, as I was readying for school, I had already watched it 3 times in its entirety. This film did not disappoint. This film exceeded every expectation I had. This film was one of the greatest horror movies I'd ever seen, and to this day is still very much in my top 10. I love Demons. I love everything about it, including the soundtrack. In 91, my parents acquired a camcorder. Now, I'd heard for years that one could make their own copies of their favorite VHS rentals by merely hooking up a VCP and a VCR or two VCRs. So I thought, at the tender age of 12, I'd try my luck. And you know what? I succeeded. My first official dub was Timothy Dalton's James Bond epic of The Living Daylights, the first of many that I would add to my collection. Actually, hundreds of dubs I would make throughout the years. Once the camcorder quit working, I just hooked up another VCR and added to my collection of store-bought VHS and hundreds of cassettes that were recorded from cable television and later satellite. Quickly, I began re-renting my faves, since renting for me had begun in 1987, and Demons was certainly on that list of the first dozen I rented to make a dub of. Finally, after a year and a half of first seeing it, I had it in my collection to watch any time I damn well chose. In the winter of 1992, my family traveled to St. Louis to attend and adore a family member's wedding. Later that night, we hit up their local video boutique. I went back to their house with two titles under my arm. The first being Zombie Lake from the late great French horror auteur Jean Rollin. Definitely one of his lesser efforts, to be certain. And Demons 2. Now, upon first viewing the video box art at their video rental, oh man, I was thrilled. I did not know this film even existed. Now, after 2 years since my initial viewing of the original Demons from 1985, I was finally going to see what became of George and his fellow band of survivors when they headed out west. Were they going to be overrun by the demonic horde upon the highways and byways of Italy? Would thousands of the demonic undead be falling out of the forest, ready for attack, always looking for a fresh kill? Such imagery. Man, it could have been great. It could have been. As you know, what we got with Demons 2 was just a rehash, a retelling of the first story with a different setting, different cast of characters for the most part. I mean, there is Bobby Rhodes, there is the security guard, and I believe we get to see Aja Argento for the first time. Yeah, yeah, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. Of course, it took years for me to believe that, but it's a good movie. But my initial reaction upon seeing Demons 2 was, this is a piece of shit. You have the perfect setup for a sequel with the end of part one, which is already a perfect horror film, a perfect ending for a horror film, a perfect setup for a sequel to a perfect horror film. And you didn't even try. So it wasn't until 1997 that I allowed myself a second viewing, giving Demons 2 a shot. 5 years, man, I held a grudge. I was furious. I was disgusted. I was just blatantly let down. I mean, it's the second greatest letdown I've ever had in my cinematic life. The first, Return of the Living Dead, to me is the greatest film, period. And Return of the Living Dead 2, again, perfect horror film, perfect setup with the ending of part one for their sequel. Perfect setup. And they don't even try. Again, like Demons 2, a returning of actors, a returning of characters. Um, Not so much characters, but definitely returning of the actors James Karen and Tom Matthews. But what a letdown! I was I was I was so bummed about Return of the Living Dead 2. I just yeah, man. I mean, granted, it's a great comedy, but it's nothing but a comedy. It doesn't even attempt to be a horror film. It has trappings of horror. It has certain horror tropes and, dare I say, atmosphere, but it's comedy. I mean, we're talking about Ken Van Wiederhorn here. Ken Van Wiederhorn doesn't even like horror, never has. So, you know, yeah, you got illusions of horror, but what you got here is one hell of a hardcore comedy. And when I say hardcore, I don't mean as in adult humor. I mean as in just 100% comedy. But enough of Return of the Living Dead Part 2 and my disdain for it being not a horror film. Demons 2 is certainly a horror film, and it's a good horror film. It's just a lousy sequel to Part 1. It could have been so much more. So after my initial viewing, I put the film away for 5 years. Didn't Had no interest in of making a dub. Had no interest in buying the VHS. I just wanted to forget it existed. And in the '97, I watched it again. And as of this date, I've seen Demon One just over 500 times. I think I'm either 503 or 505. Demons 2, I'm just at under 100 views. And uh, it's a good movie. It's a lousy sequel, though. Oh, man. With the passing of decades and into the next century, I finally learned that Lamberto Bava never had any intention of actually doing a direct sequel to Demons. His grandiose idea was that each film would be an exploration into how the demons are birthed into our world from different types of media. The first being a movie ran in a theater, the second being a movie played on cable and a demon emerging from the television set, and the third being from the pages of a book read aloud, leading many people to believe that Demons 3 is actually the ogre from 1989. It isn't. It's just the ogre. But in some markets, you will find it blatantly labeled Demons 3. I've even had some friends and fellow fans say that, you know what? The church is probably Demons 3. No, it's not. It's just the church. Um, there's been a lot said about Dario and Lamberto having a falling out in the late 80s and that they were very much going to do a Demons 3. It just didn't happen. So uh, they went their separate ways, and Dario took his protege, Michele Suave, and they did the church. Now, I got nothing against Michele Suave. I like him a lot as an actor. I mean, hell, he's in Demons in a couple of roles. I like Michele Suave as a filmmaker a lot. I love Dario Argento. I love Lamberto Bava. I just wish there had been a direct sequel to Demons, and looks like that will never happen. Bummer, dude. In 2004, I bought Demons 1 and 2 on Anchor Bay DVD. A year after that, I let a coworker borrow both films. A week after that, they had a house fire. Now, thankfully, all living escaped unharmed. However, their contents were destroyed, along with my copies of Demons 1 and 2. And you would think, being the huge fan that I am of Demons 1, and I certainly am, that I would have purchased it on some form of physical media, made a repurchase. Clearly, I have not. I don't have a hard copy of Demons except for the dubbed version from 1991 somewhere in storage. Uh, why am I so hard pressed to buy another copy or a new and improved copy of Demons? Because those certainly exist in abundance. Streaming services, several of which that I have, all have Demons on them. I can literally watch Demons in my bedroom, in my studio, in the living room, in my grandchildren's bedroom if I choose to do so. I can even watch it at work. If I choose, I can watch it in my car. I have pretty much anywhere I go, I have an internet connection, so I can watch it anywhere at any time. So I'm pretty hard pressed to spend the 50 to 60 bucks to get an updated copy, whether that be from Synapse Films or Anchor Bay. Both editions are lovely. Both editions would look great on my shelves, but I can watch it anytime, anywhere. Good quality stream too. And I guess what? I love physical media. I do, but I don't love it so much that I have to spend that much money on a film I can already watch anywhere at any time. So, no, I've got artwork inspired by demons. I have art inspired by demons, but I don't have it on physical media except for a beat up recorded EP mode copy from 1991. Someday that'll change. Someday I'll be at a resale market or I'll be at a store and I'll see it on clearance for 20 or 30 bucks and I'll finally pick it up. But until that time happens, I'm good with it being on all the streaming services. So that makes me less of a physical media collector, so be it. I call it intelligence, but there we go. I tend to ramble. So let's talk about the soundtrack to Demons 1. In the USA, a couple of Argento releases were put on video store shelves with a sticker attached, promoting the soundtrack as well as the film. Now, if you asked me in the early 90s about Argento, I'd say, oh, he's definitely a metal fan. I mean, Creepers, aka Phenomena, known as Creepers in the States back then, uh, said a soundtrack featuring Iron Maiden, Motorhead, Demons. Sticker said featuring music by Rick Springfield, Accept, Motley Crue, Billy Idol. Yeah. Um, so yeah, in the early 90s, I thought Argento was a metal fan. Now, what I come to realize as I grew a bit older, that Argento, if he was a metal fan in any way, shape, or form, it was a passing fancy that he had. Likely, he didn't have that much interest in it. His hang up has always been progressive rock, especially progressive rock of the late 60s and throughout the 70s. Big fan of progressive rock. Heavy metal, 80s heavy metal? I don't think so. I think that had something more to do with the production companies saying, "Hey, let's make this viable for really make this viable for an American market." You know, MTV International was certainly hitting. MTV wasn't just an American thing. Even if you couldn't get it in a foreign country, you knew about MTV. So by 85 and 86, this was a very viable concern. You know, let's make it more American. Let's make it more acceptable to the youth. Let's put some headbanging music in there, which was a great idea. I mean, the great soundtracks. But looking online just a couple of days ago on eBay, my primary source for purchasing items, occasionally Amazon, but mostly eBay. I was looking up to see what all releases they had of Demons on vinyl. Now, as far as tributes and the work of Claudio Simonetti, there's a lot. There's 4 or 5 different discs you can get. all heavily decorated, all very expensive, but they're all Claudio Simonetti. There's nothing else. There, there's a disc you can get that is a what remixes by the likes of Skinny Puppy and etc., or the artist formerly known as Skinny Puppy. Um, no, I'm not interested in that. I want the album that has Motley Crue, that has Billy Idol, that has Go West, which people seem to love to go on and on about. Um, except Saxon. That's what I want. Hell, even The Adventures. This is what I want to have on vinyl. Well, in 1985, they did release an album compilation that featured Claudio Simonetti and a variety of American and European rock, pop slash metal bands. And to my knowledge, that was only released once. It was released through RCA Italy and probably never even seen the States. Secondary market, import maybe, but very few because I looked on eBay and I couldn't find this anywhere. If you look it up on YouTube, you can find like a 37-second video of the promotion of such an album. And it's pretty cool. But as far as finding on eBay, when you do find it, oh man, I'm not willing to pay what it's likely to cost because I can't see that being sold for less than $50. And it's going to be, and I doubt it'll be gently used. It'll probably be heavily used, going around $50. So I'm out. I'm not willing to purchase that, but I would like to have it in my collection someday. But yeah, a great soundtrack to a great film. Demons 2, equally a great soundtrack. Demons 2 soundtrack cover is very 1986. It's more uh, gothic, hard rock. I can't think of any metal songs actually on the soundtrack. But enough of the part two soundtrack. Let's get back to the soundtrack to part one. Now, if you have the VHS copy, you'll notice that it says Rick Springfield is on the soundtrack. And if you watch the end credits, it says Rick Springfield and the Scorpions performing Dynamite are on the soundtrack as well. I have yet to hear either of these two songs by Rick Springfield or the Scorpions on the soundtrack. Now, maybe my ears are just not attuned to the right level to hear these, but I've seen the film over 500 times and I've never heard them. So if they're there, I'm ignorant. But on the album, they're definitely there. And they were intended to be in the movie, even if they didn't show up. Maybe they're on the cutting room floor somewhere. I don't know, but I've never heard them. Um, it's a great soundtrack. One day I will have it in my collection. If you already have it in your collection, good for you, man. Impressive. All right, let's get on to some artwork. But his first work is Fabiola Toledo, gorgeous Italian horror movie actress. Well, gorgeous Italian film actress. I don't think she did too many horror films. She was absolutely gorgeous. She's one of Bobby Rhodes' girls. And this is during her transitional period from gorgeous Italian babe to bloody, disgusting demon. This is an acrylic. It took me about 5.5 hours to do. She's in that transitional period. You see her hands all demoned out. She's got the demonic phalanges, but the face is yet to turn. And I love that stare. That's just fantastic. Really proud of that work. This is one of Italian actor Lino Salemme, who showed up in Demone as Ripper, leader of the punk gang that was snorting coke through a coke can. He showed up in part two as a security guard, and this is from part two, where he's reaching through the elevator. This took just about 5 hours, and it is acrylic. And that is it. See ya in the next video. Until next time, try to deny the daylight.